everyone. Welcome to the Self-Agency Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is a space where we explore, discover, and share tools, techniques, and wisdom to help you build and maintain a sense of agency. Thank you so much for joining me today, Thomas. I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation. We actually met when I finally did the math the other day. We met about 4 years ago. Yeah. And
it's over 4 years.
Yeah. And time has flown. And we met at a very pivotal moment in my world. And it's been really cool to see your kind of transformation and everything since that time, as well as my own. I was kind of reflecting on that the other day when we sparked our conversation again, because I had just finished school for holistic nutrition. I had broken up with my partner who I thought was going to be forever. I was about to go to India to do my yoga teacher training. Like everything was shifting and moving so powerfully. And then to spark a conversation and a connection with you over, I think it was SUP yoga. We did the paddleboard yoga. Yeah. And it was just, I loved the concept of your conscious business and the way you not only conduct yourself, but conduct everything that you bring into the business that you're doing. So Alberta Apparel being conscious clothing is the best kind of summation that I can come up with, using local manufacturers, doing the production and getting everything as close to home as possible is really fascinating. And then not only have you started and launched and evolved this business in such a powerful way over these last 4 years, but you're also a new dad, and that's incredible. So I'm really excited to launch into this conversation with you and hear what it takes to be a conscious business owner in today's society and climate, as well as take on a family and a new little one and all of those things in between. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So first and foremost, I want to dive into what sparked the idea. What was it behind Alberta Apparel that got you into it? Because you've chosen a route of local sourcing and staying as close to home in Canada as possible. And this isn't something that's really done that often. So what sparked this, and how did you get to where you are now?
So there were a couple of things that happened. For me, I guess without any particular order, one of them was that I saw nobody was doing what we're doing then. So this would have been early summer in 2015, right before we met. And so I looked into the idea more, and I realized that there were other companies doing this in other parts of the world, whether it was for a kind of province or state or a city. And so that was part of it, that I wanted to explore the idea of seeing if this would work here, but also I also wanted to run my own company and run my own show to see if I was any good at it and to learn those challenges. So for me, it was a combination of the idea itself, and then also um, striking out on my own. And from that, afterwards, as things were evolving, I started seeing my now wife, and so she had some input into how the company could run and what the vision could be. And so we wanted to be, based on the name especially, we want to be local, but more than that, we wanted to be transparently local. So I have, just to fast forward a bit, I've been pretty transparent when it comes to, where things are from, what we do well and what we don't do well, and where we're looking to improve. You know, the pricing, even, like, I've published my pricing so people understand what the costs are on clothing. And the reason I did that was because I want to be a voice for the Canadian apparel industry, specifically for factories that there are not a lot of. And so I wanted that to be
Interesting. Yeah.
very apparent so that people understand that, their $10 t-shirt that they bought is not a realistic or sustainable price for someone to pay for a product. Because if you go back and look at all the different steps, the materials,
Mm.
all the things that go into that shirt or those pair of jeans, it is not sustainable in so many ways. And so we want to be an advocate for the local Canadian industry, but also for just brands in general that are trying to sell product for a higher price for good reason.
Yeah. I think that's such a, I love everything about the transparency and the breakdown, actually offering that breakdown to people, because quite often you can get caught in that as a consumer. You can get caught in looking at a price of something versus something else and be like, well, why would I pay X amount, which is so much higher, when I can get this product for literally a like half of or
Right,
three quarters of the price.
right.
So I would really love your experience with fast fashion and what it looks like to actually be a manufacturer in this game, and what it looks like from a factory standpoint, what it looks like from a
Mhm.
business standpoint, like a business owner, and how it is that you're looking to educate people around that, because I don't think it's talked about enough, really.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we're not the first as a company, and
Mm-hmm.
and uh, you know, there are organizations. One of them, the largest, being Fashion Revolution, which was started about 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm.
But we really believe in just taking simple steps towards, you know, making that world, making the apparel and fashion world a better place. And it doesn't have to be very complicated. So um, I might be getting off a bit off topic here, but some of the things we just encourage people to do is just research brands that you're buying, and it doesn't take a lot of time
Yeah.
because you're typically not buying clothing every week. So if you can just take a few minutes to research a brand when you buy something once a month or every 2 weeks, then it doesn't take up a lot of time.
Mm.
But also just simple things like making sure that the clothing that you buy lasts for a long time. If you can't afford to buy something that's local or locally made, then maybe you can just take something and make it last for a long time, which means that it's staying out of the landfill longer and you're getting more life out of that product as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that big time. Like when I go and buy something just from any generic place, I have to replace it so much quicker because it's the seam or the hem will kind of come undone, or it's quick to tear, or it loses its like form and it starts to get baggy and weird. So then you just end up going to buy another one anyways. But the one thing that I think I really love and value about not only the product, but what it is that you stand for is this might sound a little weird, but what I've noticed is the majority of people or companies that I've seen, when they go and use something like, say, hemp or bamboo or something more sustainable or whatever it looks like, there's this tendency to make it very like hippie type clothing. So you get like those harem pants, or you get the loose fitting tank tops that look very, like for lack of a better word, hippie. And for some of us that are in corporate or they are in business or whatever that looks like, we still want an option where we can bring those clothes into the workplace and feel good about what we're wearing no matter where we
Mhm.
are. Like we're not just at a festival, we're
Right.
showing up in society. And I absolutely love your products because I know that I've worn one of your sweaters into right before a business meeting, and I took it off during, but I felt comfortable wearing it there because it's designed in a way that you can feel confident in, if that makes sense. So I think you're hitting a lot of different angles, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, I guess the market that we're trying to go after is not just people who are thinking about buying local and understanding that the product is made locally and it represents Alberta, which a lot of people love. But it's a market where we definitely think that some, not all, but some of our clothing can be used for, a nice night out. It can be used
Hmm.
for just lounge around at home. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier in a sense that, when you buy something, just think about where it comes from. And also you can think about, how it can be multi-used. So it's not
Hmm.
just like, hey, this t-shirt's for like this purpose. So that's a trend that's happening quite a bit in the industry. You'll see as an example,
Cool.
like merino wool is gaining quite a bit of popularity because it's great
Yeah.
for activities, high-end activities and sweating, so like skiing or hiking. But it's also to the point where, like you said, it's not doesn't look like athletic wear necessarily. It can also look like you're going out for you're traveling, you're going for a casual dinner or maybe even a nice dinner.
Hmm.
And so you know, you can reuse that piece over and over for different purposes. And you can use it over and over because the way that the fabric is not built, but the way the characteristics that it has basically allows you to use that shirt over and over without having to wash it every time. Whereas like cotton
Mm.
stinks and other fabric stinks, bamboo doesn't have that. It also kind of repels odor as well as merino wool. So
Yeah.
you can go on a trip and use that shirt two, three, four times in a row actually, and no one would know the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I live in my merino, especially like living in New Zealand now, where merino wool is everywhere and so accessible. I live in it, and it's so true. You can throw it in the wash and not worry about it losing its anything, but you can also wear it on a hike and then go do something the very next day and feel fine in it. So, absolutely. Okay, so one thing I'm curious about as a I would say more conscious business owner is how I really do resonate with everything that you're doing. Do you ever have moments where you notice, I guess, maybe some of your values are really questioned, or you have to kind of ask yourself where you'll kind of give and take? Like, are there ever moments where you're like, you know what, it would be so much cheaper for me to just do this option? And do you waver? And obviously, there is zero judgment here. I just want to have this candid conversation because I can imagine that sometimes it can be tough to like toe that straight and narrow line when you are trying to feed a family or trying to be a business owner and keep afloat and this and that and whatever it looks like. So, what happens when your boundaries are maybe crossed or your values are being, I guess, pushed a little?
Yeah, for sure. That does come up. I would say monthly
Mm,
because there's some fantastic clothing out there that is not made in Canada that I'd like to source because it looks great and it feels great for sure. So that is definitely a challenge. Um, it's a small example, but recently
mm,
I sourced these. They're called clip labels, and you put them on, toques or shirts, and they're just little labels that sit at the bottom of a garment. And
yeah.
after I got two quotes from my main manufacturers, and afterwards the one said, "Well, we can't get that low." I'm like, "Well, your competitor can," and they said, well, they're getting that low because they actually offsource that to Asia. And I said, really? Are you sure? Because they're Canadian and they manufacture their products here in Ottawa. And they said, no, no, they're
Mm.
these particular labels are the one product that they offsource to China. So I felt
Wow.
kind of bad because I didn't know this because their other products are made in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's an example where partially it's education and just like you have to keep asking the questions. Um,
Mhm.
and I guess I lost my train of thought, but another example is um, with the prices themselves too,
Right.
because our our prices are much higher for the category of clothing that we're in. So oftentimes we're challenged because, so I'll give you an example. If the hoodie that you have costs, if you were to buy, it's like $85, which means that if we sell it to a retailer to sell for us,
Hmm.
we'd have to charge them half of that. So like $42.50.
Right.
Our cost on that hoodie, like after the hoodie, the shipping, the embroidery is like, it's like over $35. So there really isn't a
Mm.
lot of room for us to like sell our stuff for less money, because we should be actually selling that hoodie for like $100 or $110. But my only fear
Yeah.
is that it's just not going to sell. Like people just won't pay that much because we're not like a luxury brand.
Mm.
So I've definitely been tempted to be like, how do I make this cheaper? Um,
Yep.
and the answer is I can't. If I were to make that hoodie elsewhere in Canada, it's not going to be cheaper. It'd be more expensive. So
Mm.
I'd have to charge like 120 or 150 or even like 180 for that same hoodie. Um, but at the end of the day, that there is a limit on how much people will pay for my brand, and it's not over $100 yet.
Right. Which, oh man, it just blows my mind because like you look at, say, like I'm so comfortable with talking about different brands and names because I'm not in the business. So by no means do you have to use names or anything like that. But when I look at something like a Lululemon, for example, and I look at how the quality of that product has just dropped so drastically, and I can say this because I worked there for a time. I know firsthand that the quality is so low because they've started outsourcing and they get their stuff made in so many different places that are not Canada. They're not, nothing is made in Canada anymore. Yet they can still charge those exorbitant prices and people will pay them. And I do think a lot of it comes down to the brand name. A lot of it comes down to wanting
Yes.
that Lululemon symbol on the clothing. But
Yes.
the quality is just atrocious. And it breaks my heart because it's this yoga company that says their values lie in yoga and the eight limbs of the philosophy and this and that. And none of them do. They are so guilty of using so much plastic, so much plastic. And the quality of clothing has just gone so far down, and they're not transparent about any of this. And it breaks my heart because then I see people out there who are doing good work, who are asking the questions and locally sourcing things. And if they can't locally source it, they're doing an ethical job at it. And people question them and say, why is your product so much money? And that just, I can't wrap my head around it. It makes no sense. So like how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is there is no perfect clothing company, right? There's no,
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest, with you, I know more than the average person does about Lululemon, but I don't research into them. Like I don't read their annual reports. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
keep in touch on the news as to what's happening with their financials and whatnot.
yeah. Mm,
Um, but what I would say is that most clothing companies out there are getting better at being transparent, which is a step in the right direction. Um,
mm-hmm.
and this ties back to the nonprofit fashion revolution, which the whole premise of the organization is to not shame companies, but it's really to bring light the issues that need to be discussed. And
Mm,
we or they are the forum for that to happen, to facilitate discussions and to create that
yeah.
dialogue, to ask questions, to answer questions, and get people involved, so they become better consumers. They become advocates,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't sit on the sideline. They ask questions, and these brands can no longer hide behind it. So
Yeah,
even brands
that's
like,
awesome.
you know, H&M, and all these big Forever 21, all these big guys, they are starting to become more transparent. And because of that, they're also changing their methodologies and their strategies in terms
Mm.
of how they produce clothing as well. So
Wow.
don't quote me on this, but it might be H&M, it might be Forever 21, but one of those two, or one of those big brand names, they are actually starting to rent clothing. And so I don't know in the long term if this is beneficial for everybody, but the idea
Okay,
here
explain
is,
this to me. Yeah.
yeah, so it'd be kind of like a library in a sense that you would just rent it, you pay a certain amount. I don't know how long you can rent clothing for. It's not available everywhere. It's a pilot project, but you can rent clothing. So
Wow.
the point is that you're returning the clothing, and the life cycle of that piece of clothing will be extended for much longer that way, because you're not buying it for $10 and then throwing it out, because that's the
Right.
issue, is that when the clothing is so cheap, it's easy mentally and financially to just throw it out or donate it. And that's an issue,
Mm-hmm.
because that's creating a demand for more new clothing, and it's also filling up our landfills and just creating a huge issue with the secondhand clothing industry. So
Mm.
so essentially, the idea here is that you can rent clothing, return it, and then you're not committed to buying it, but also you're not throwing things out. I think the only issue with that
Interesting.
model is that now people are like, oh, I can just rent stuff all the time, and then it becomes a question of like ADHD, where you're like, I always need new stuff. I always need something new. Even if I'm renting it and I'm getting rid of it, I'm always
Yeah.
needing something new. Whereas it's like, no, like you don't need that new t-shirt every week. Like it's
Yeah.
nobody, like not nobody, but almost nobody cares what you're wearing.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
it's superficial, and it sets a bad precedence for not just the industry but for the end users. Like, some of these companies have
Hmm.
52 styles a year, so every week they're coming out with different things, and it's
Yeah.
like, no, like we don't need to buy stuff. It used to be 4 seasons of buying a year: fall, winter, spring, summer, and
Yeah.
now it's like, you know, new stuff all the time, and it's just overwhelming how much advertising marketing is being shoved down people's throats on social
Yeah.
media, because they have new stuff to advertise. Whereas a company like mine, like, we'll come out with a new design a couple times a year, so maybe we should do it a little bit more often. But ours is not a trend. It's not a fashion trend. It's like, this is clothing that's made in Canada. It represents Alberta. That's not a trend. It's like,
Hmm.
you're Albertan. Hopefully you find this stuff nice to wear a year, 5 years from now, and hopefully it
Yeah.
lasts that long.
Yeah, it's more of that lifestyle thing, you know? Like I see so many people who just it's like the flavor of the week. Like what's cool right now and let me get my hands on it. But I mean, it blows my mind, this mass consumerism, because there's no value. And I think my other part to the whole renting is it takes out the like emotion of it, you know? Like I remember when I was younger, my parents would always say, like, if you want those pair of jeans, you have to work for them. You have to save up your money and then you can buy them. So like I cared about every single purchase I made growing up because it was my hard-earned money, and I wanted to make sure I was like emotionally invested in this pair of jeans or this whatever because it meant something. And now, like with disposable income, people can just walk in and buy like billions of articles of clothing in I would like the H&Ms, the Forever 21s, because they're like $1 for a t-shirt, you know?
Well,
And I look
yes.
at it and it's gone. That emotion is gone. The connection, the care, all of it is gone. And
Well,
that's
exactly.
sad.
Yeah, no, it's true. Generally speaking, people don't care about clothing, like they don't fold it as nicely, they don't put it away. You know,
Mhm.
they, like it's just, it doesn't last as long. I think there's a statistic out there that about, once again, don't quote me because this could be just from one source, but I think about 80% of new clothing gets thrown out or donated within one year.
That would not surprise me. Yeah.
So we do need to look at this and say, how do we just like make clothing last longer? And
Mm.
a pair of jeans is a pair of jeans. It's not like going out of style. Um, and definitely like that
Yeah.
emotional attachment, like you said, because it's what's happened in the last 30, 40 years is that manufacturing has moved offshore. So things have become cheaper from a real dollar and a nominal dollar perspective. So the cheaper things are, the less attached you are to it because you didn't have to earn it as much as you did
Yeah.
before. And that is true. Like the clothing prices have gone down so much to the point where it is disposable. It's like I can go to a movie and spend $15 on a movie, or I can spend $15 on a t-shirt. So
Mm.
that mentality of like how you categorize the value of a t-shirt or pair of jeans is totally different. Versus like I'll use myself an example just because I know obviously my spending habits. I don't make a ton of money, but I will spend you know $200 on a pair of pants. But I know the brand, I
Mm.
know what they do, I know it's made in Canada, and
Yeah.
this particular pair I'm talking about, it's a Canadian brand, and they're internationally well known, but it's one of the best pair of pants I've ever owned, if not the best. Like the fit, the fabric, the
Mm.
feel, the wear and tear, like the stitch work. They're just
Wow.
extremely well made, and every little piece of detail is built into there, um, and they'll last for hopefully 5 years, and I wear them probably once a week.
Yeah.
So that like, and that's a lot of money for a pair of pants, but it will last longer, and they're just like a plain olive pair of pants. But you know,
Hmm.
to go back to what you said earlier, if you spend $50 on a pair of pants, they're just not going to last as long. Like maybe you'll get
No.
lucky and they will if it was a good batch and that particular seamstress or whoever making them is doing a good job. But the quality control, for a
Mm.
$50 pair of jeans is low because they can't afford to have a high quality control process built in there if it's only $50. So, and
Exactly.
you're not gonna,
Yeah.
there's no warranty. They're not gonna take them back or do anything with them. Whereas a brand like Arc'teryx, Patagonia, North Face, like if there's a problem with it, like North Face and Patagonia have a lifetime guarantee on the craftsmanship of the product. So,
Yeah.
you take something 5, 10 years later, they're gonna fix it because environmentally they know it's the right thing to do, but also it's the right thing to do for their brand.
Mm. Yeah, and I love that environmental piece too, like we get so sometimes we can get so removed and just think clothing is clothing that covers my body and it looks good or whatever, and it allows me to hike or it allows me to play soccer, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, these resources are coming from, hopefully they're natural, but a lot of the time they're not anymore. But the worst part is that they're getting thrown out. They're not even a lot of the time getting taken to a secondhand store or to a thrift shop. They're being thrown out because either they don't have the warranty and they aren't getting fixed, or people think it's cheaper to just go buy a new one than take it to a seamstress and get it fixed. So we're throwing these things out, and it's this environmental capacity of it is just as important, and we need to talk about that as well. Like, I love what Patagonia is doing. I really love that brand. I think I agree with everything that they stand for, and their transparency is so
Sorry,
invaluable.
which brand? Yeah, yeah,
Patagonia.
Patagonia is
Yeah.
definitely a leader there for sure.
Yeah.
And
So
and
wonderful.
if you've read any of the books that the owners come out with, he's quite eccentric. Like, to be upfront, he's quite eccentric.
Yeah.
But um, what he has done for the industry, like he's basically always ahead of his competition. And his competition, like the North
Yeah.
Face, is in a good example where the owner passed or died a while ago, but him and the owner of Patagonia, they were like best friends, adventure buddies. Um,
What?
yeah, they like lots of trips together, um, ice
That's
climbing,
amazing.
mountaineering, rock climbing. Like they know each other decades, decades and decades. So I'm sure they
Wow.
had some influence on each other um, over the decades that they each built their respective businesses. Um, and the difference is Patagonia is a private company. It's owned 100% by Yvon Chouinard. So we don't
Yeah.
know how much they really make, and but they don't have to answer to shareholders, and North Face is a bit different in the sense that
Wow.
they're publicly traded and they have shareholders and they have a board of directors, and it's like a classic American structured company.
Mm. But that's a really cool point as well, is this whole elevating people rather than this competition. Like when you can look at North Face and Patagonia, who are competitors, they're in the exact same realm if you look at it that way. And that the fact that they can be friends and that they can elevate each other and this and that rather than hating on the other and rather than trying to
Yep.
push the other down, that speaks volumes. That is incredible.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I'm so glad you shared that.
yeah, we don't talk to our quote unquote competitors here. Like Alberta Apparel doesn't too much, but we're actually meet up with one of
Mm,
them next week just to kind of go over some stuff, catch up a bit, and probably going to meet with them more regularly because I think we can learn from each
yeah.
other and potentially help each other out. So
Wow. Yes. Yes, I love that.
yeah,
Awesome. That's so great. Okay, so I want to get deeper into because what you're doing in the, I guess, fashion realm or apparel realm is so incredible. And being involved with Fashion Revolution is like paramount to what it means to be a conscious business owner. So, how do you keep all of this straight and how do you keep in integrity and hold yourself accountable while simultaneously investing in a relationship with your wife and raising a little one in this world that we know today? How do you keep this all not together? Because I think that's the wrong usage of word, but how do you keep yourself in that space of connection and empowered and making conscious decisions and not trying to, I guess, just turn a profit to support your family and then simultaneously support your family? What does that look like?
um, so to separate them, like for me, it's fairly easy. I started my business when I was older than most people, I would say, in Calgary that are entrepreneurs. And I
Mm,
don't typically, there's a mentality out there that, work hard, play hard, which is great. I've been there and done that. And for me, I, I'm pretty good at separating the two. Like physically, I don't work more than like 50 hours a week. I go to
mm,
a couple networking events a month maybe, and on weekends, I'm not doing markets. I don't do a lot of work. I'll check my email a couple times a day on the weekends and the evenings, but I'm
mm,
not in front of my laptop on the weekends or evenings. So I
mm,
try to, do some family stuff in the morning before my kid goes to daycare, and in the evening before she goes to bed, and then you know on the weekends, obviously, it's mostly family oriented. Um, so there's that, and then for me,
mm,
like I know I could work more. Everyone knows they could pretty much work a little bit more, but what for me the return on that, um, like I know that the return on that is not as important as the balance of like taking time to spend time with my family or taking time for myself or with family or
yes.
friends, um, and making sure that I'm not doing this and getting sick of it or burning out down the road.
Yeah.
So, so I still like to, stay active in the community, stay active physically, and spend time with my family. And
Mm,
that's not my advice to entrepreneurs necessarily. Like everybody's different. But I think that for
Yeah.
me, it's worked, and I've found ways to be more productive with the time, without having to say, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, I've got to put in 60, 70 hours this week, and putting that pressure on myself. Even though I know I could work
Yeah.
more, like physically, I could work more. I know that, but I choose not to,
Yeah.
and have that balance for sure.
I love that. It is a choice. It's absolutely a choice. And I think it's so valuable to say it's not a one size fits all. There's not one way to be an entrepreneur or to be successful or to be XYZ. It is very much, you have to find what works for you and you don't want to miss out on life. Because could you imagine all of the incredible things that you would miss out on if you were working those 60, 70-hour weeks? Like you have a really beautiful life outside of the business. Like it's beautiful within it, but it's you have so much going on as well. So what does Thomas time look like? Like when you're because everything sounds very external, you know? You've got a business that is successful, you're involved with different organizations and movements and that kind of thing. You've got a wife, you've got all of these things with a little one as well. How do you reconnect with yourself? How do you stay in that space of centered and knowing what's right for you? What has that journey been?
So I would say that because of the business, but then as you mentioned, we have a 17-month-old girl at home.
Hmm.
Things are different now where it's not about us time with my wife and I as much as it is about we time with the three of us. And our energy and our time is more
Mm-hmm.
focused on her when she's around us and when she's awake. So it is different. Like on a family side, the dynamic has shifted to her and what's best for her, what's best for the family. And
Right.
hopefully because of that, we're becoming, not to say not either of us were selfish to begin with, but we're becoming more focused on the family first sort of thing versus
Mm.
us first. So, for me, like I don't have a lot of time just for me, like me myself as an individual or as a business owner to like, you know, go and do things on my own, compared to before,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. So I would say that that has to be something that could be worked on in terms of just, um, whether it's like, um, physical, self, care, or on the mental side. I think that's something that
Yeah.
could be done, like carve out a little bit of time each day to do something, whether it's, it could be
Mm.
reading or meditation or just going for a walk up by yourself or something like that. But I would venture to guess that most people who have a business and then start a family, they don't make the time, or they just don't have the
Mm-hmm.
time for that, like they used to. There's you can't create more
Yeah.
time. Um, you can only do things faster or just focus on less. So one of my goals is to, we
Mm.
have a second kid on the way early next year, and one of
Hmm.
my things is I'm going to cut down on a couple of activities, um, you know, sports
Yeah.
wise, extracurricular wise, for sure, so that life is less cluttered.
Mm. I think that is a version of self care, right? Like noticing the things that you can let go of or can ease out of in order to really put that focus on the things that you consider to matter the most. And I think that is definitely an element of self care. And again, it's not a one size fits all. So it sounds like you still know, like if that makes sense, you still know the things that would top you up or the things that do feed you and nourish you, and when they happen, they happen, and when family happens, they come first. And I think that's still such a valuable way to look at it and approach it, is taking it one step at a time and seeing what your capacity is in that moment. So I think that is still really, really valuable.
Yeah,
Congratulations on the little one
thanks.
coming.
Yeah, Yeah, it's exciting.
So
Yeah,
exciting.
totally.
So
Don't know what
exciting.
we're in for
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh. So I do have another question for you. And this question is, well, first and foremost, it's my favorite question. I love the answers that I get for this one because I think it really shows where people's hearts lie and what is the most important thing for them. I guess what fuels them, or kind of that sacred rage that they bring to the table and drives them to make change or to do something bigger than themselves. So take a moment and think into from a place of your truest self, like in the center of you. When you look at our global society, our global climate, everything that is occurring, is there one thing you see and it's a big change that you would want to make? Or maybe it's a societal norm that you would want to disrupt? What is that big change? Or maybe it's a small baby step change. Doesn't matter the capacity, but what is it and
I
why?
think just locally, and when I say local, I mean Calgary and maybe even Alberta, just because of the industry that
Mm,
my business is and the industry that revolution revolves around, is just, yeah,
mm,
getting people to be smarter, more savvy, and
yeah.
educated, mature consumers when it comes to clothing. And it's ironic that I
Mm,
might say this because obviously I make money by getting people to buy clothing. But as a company, we also do a lot of um, presentations around the industry and fast fashion and the apparel world, and we do encourage people to buy less. 100% buy quality over quantity,
mm-hmm.
buy less, be savvy. Little things, like I said before, little things make a huge difference. Buy less clothing, know where it comes from, do a clothing swap, organize a clothing swap with friends, go check out your local
So
vintage
fun.
store. All these things like make a huge difference because I've seen, from a bigger scale, like I've seen pictures and I've read research about the clothing industry, and I've seen
Mm,
locally, bags and bags of clothing that nobody can use because we have so much of it. Even people who don't make
yeah.
a lot of money, or even people who are homeless, don't typically need more clothing because there's so much of it to give away that they can't even do anything with it, right? There's so much that
Wow.
we have to ship it overseas, um, and get rid of it essentially, and give it to other countries because we're throwing out at a faster rate than we're essentially needing it. So all these things mean a
Mm,
lot to me, and if we can make a difference, 1 week at a time in terms of how people approach clothing, that's great. And yes, clothing stores, brands will suffer. They will absolutely suffer. Retail in Canada has plateaued recently, and some places it's gone
yeah.
down. But the stronger will survive, the better brands will survive. And my hope
Mm,
professionally is that more people buy from local brands, but specifically they buy from brands that aligns with their values, and hopefully we can, ethically influence their values in the right direction.
mm. Yes, I think yes, every single thing that you just said is full body chills because that's what it's all about. It's not you sitting here saying only buy from my brand. It's you sitting here saying there's a bigger picture here, people. There's more to this story. It goes way beyond what we can even imagine. And it is that mass consumerism. It is that place of being emotionally disconnected and not understanding the consequences of our actions and really choosing where our dollar
Yeah.
goes. Because at the end of the day, it all ripples out. This every single purchase you make decides everything moving forward. It decides who is in power, it decides who has the biggest market value and the biggest profit share, all of this and all of that. But at the end of the day, it is that education piece. It is getting really clear on your values and then choosing who aligns with you. If you care about the environment, choose the company that aligns with that. If you care about eliminating child slavery and child labor, then get in line with that and choose that company. Like, do the things that resonate most with you. And I really, really appreciate your take and your insight on that one. I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, there's you talked about sustainability, you talk about, business strategy. I mean, you look at some of these big global brands like Forever 21 bankrupt. All these, not all these, but a lot of big global brand names that are clothing brands that also have their own flagship stores, hundreds of them around the world in malls. They're getting decimated
Mm,
because the consumer habits are changing. They're buying online, so that's one
yeah,
factor. But the other factor is that
right.
people are starting to think about where their clothing comes from, just like where people think about where their food comes from. And they want to
Mm-hmm.
waste less, they want to buy less, they want healthier products, and they're willing to pay, especially millennials, they want to pay more for a product, maybe because it's trendy, but mostly I would say because they know that brand. It's a local brand, and they know that company has to charge more for that kombucha or for that the meat you're
Mm-hmm.
buying or the vegetables, the T-shirt. So a lot of these big brands, like, it isn't a sustainable model to create new clothing every week or every 2 weeks, uh, because you're just discounting it for 50% off a month or two later. Um, and it's
Yeah.
just yeah, it's pretty upsetting.
Mm. So, is there one little list? This will be my last question for you. I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but I will respect your time. Is there one? Okay, let's hear your top three pieces of, I guess, guidance for people who are looking to be more conscious consumers. Because in your previous answer, you did list quite a few of them, and they're all perfect. And I'm sure they're going to come up again right now, but just top three for those who are like, you know what, I don't know where to start. What do I do? How do I do better? Where are the first three steps that they can take?
Yeah, I think I love the approach of keeping it simple. So I would say, in no particular order, three pieces of advice would be, for starting, would be: one is to think about what you're buying, and don't think of it like, oh, I'll just buy this t-shirt, it's so cheap, versus, hey,
Mm-hmm.
what do I need this t-shirt for? Do I really need a new t-shirt? How long am I going to wear this for? So think about those things before you buy something. And then the second thing is, we just built a list of, uh, all these consignment shops in Calgary, and it's never been done before, but there's dozens of them. They're everywhere. They're small. They're
Wow.
everywhere. So we're going to list that on the Fashion Revolution website so that hopefully people will go to that. I don't
Mm,
know where to start, and they're overwhelmed with information and decisions. So we'll make it easy for them by saying, here's a list. Find out what we have a map
yes.
so that you can find out, where you live and where the closest ones are. Phone them, email them, figure out if they have stuff that is in your size. Look at their Instagram, see what they have come in each day. And so think about buying
Mm-hmm.
secondhand. And this is right now more geared towards women. If you look at the stores, most of them are women based, and most of their clothing is women. There's only one or two men's consignment stores, but we want to change that for men as well,
Wow.
where they think about buying secondhand. And then I think the third thing is just like, set a budget, just like per year or per month. How much do you spend? Is it like $100 a month? Is it $500 a month? Whatever it is that you spend on clothing, so that you're not buying, more than that, and then just adjust it. Like, maybe you can lower it, and that money can go towards, like, your
Mm.
savings or vacation, or, somebody. But think about how much you spend, set a budget, and then just stick to it. Um, because I think a lot of people
Yeah.
would be surprised as to how much they actually do spend, even though they're potentially buying cheaper items. Um, you know, it adds up for sure.
Mm. Definitely. I love that. So, one, we're going to check in with ourselves. We're going to see why we're buying it, if we need it. Really ask the questions before you make that purchase. Two, we're going to shop locally and see what's, I guess, available in our area and do those either secondhand shop or maybe even clothes swap with friends so that you're getting something fresh and they're also getting something fresh. And then third, we're going to check in with our budget, which I think we can all do in general, really. Really check in with that and see how much it is that we're spending, why we're spending it, and does it need adjustment.
Yeah,
I love that. I think that's so, so wonderful. And it's so doable. So, so doable.
yeah, yeah,
Thomas, I thank you so, so much for your time. I think this was so illuminating into all aspects of the apparel world and what it really means to not only us as a consumer, but also the environment and everything that it ripples out and touches. So I so, so greatly appreciate your insight, your experience, and everything that you bring to the table. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing it with us.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening. And if there's anything at all that you want to explore or you have ideas about and want to get into, please drop me a line. You can find us at The Self Agency Advocate on both Facebook and Instagram. And I would absolutely love to chat. So let's connect.